We're back. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Voices 2021. This is BOF's annual gathering for big thinkers. I'm Imran Ahmed, founder and CEO of the Business of Fashion. It's been 2 years since we gathered here physically, and since then, our professional and our personal worlds have been turned upside down by the pandemic. But over the past year, the BOF team has worked tirelessly to unite a group of exceptional people from around the world, from different industries and disciplines, to cultivate, exchange, and make sense of the world. And that is why we are here in Oxfordshire. Voices isn't just about fashion people talking to fashion people about fashion. If the last 2 years have taught us anything, it's that no industry or business lives in a vacuum. This industry, like all others, is more connected than ever to the forces shaping the wider world. So our mission for Voices remains unchanged. And as always, we have an incredible group of thinkers, world shapers, and leaders here with us. And they have made it here through pandemic travel restrictions and lots of testing to ensure that we have the safest event possible. But following our virtual edition last year, which enabled us to create shared moments of connection and conversation with the BOF professional community in more than 125 countries, we are also welcoming people from around the world to share in the insights and the essential talks and discussions that emerge over the next few days. So a big welcome to our BOF professional members watching at home, in schools and offices all around the world. Right now, in the chat window next to your screen, let us know where in the world you're joining from today. I always love to see all of the messages from all of you all around the world. And finally, Voices would not be possible without the support of our trusted partners. McKinsey & Company, Shopify, Clearco, Klarna, Brand Live, Flannels, Snap, Getty Images, and Soho House. That's a mouthful. But our partners form a core part of the Voices experience, and they are just as curated as everything here at Voices 2021. So, with those introductions out of the way, it's time to get started with our 5 key content sessions. There are some hard truths to face and some amazing people to meet. We've assembled some of the world's foremost experts, creative minds, executives, and activists to help us make sense of the ongoing shifts unfolding around us and to give us a sense of what the world might look like as we look ahead to 2022. Over the next 2 days, we're taking you on a learning journey designed to inspire you and expand your horizons, and sometimes to take you outside your comfort zone. There are 5 carefully curated content sessions touching on all of the topics shaping fashion, culture, and business. Later today, we go inside the fashion system, from Balenciaga, luxury's hottest brand, to cultural collaborations with Tommy Hilfiger. A group of powerful speakers will hold a mirror up to our industry. This afternoon, we enter the world of technology and innovation, starting with Merlin Sheldrake, who studies the neglected megascience of mushrooms. A group of boundary-pushing entrepreneurs and scientists will help explain how innovations can help address some of fashion's greatest challenges and capture new business opportunities. Tomorrow, we'll peek into the future, exploring the future of work, the future of retail, and the future of travel. Our expert speakers will provide insights on how to prepare for a changed world in our session called Talk to Me About the Future. And finally, live your best life. We will hear from a truly inspiring group of people whose own personal lived experiences will help us understand how we can all be the most authentic, healthy, and fulfilled versions of ourselves. Throughout it all, please share your feedback with us, your questions, your photos, using the hashtag BOFVoices to join the global conversation. And for those of you tuning in from home, you can share your comments and questions for our speakers in the chat window next to the video player. But first, we start with the wider world. This was our second year living in the shadow of the coronavirus pandemic. But in truth, we are at the crossroads of 5 intersectional global crises. A public health crisis with much of the developing world still largely unvaccinated, and the new Omicron variant, which has reminded us that, sadly, this pandemic is far from over. 2, an unprecedented economic dislocation that is exacerbating devastating inequality, with more than 100 million more people living in poverty than in pre-COVID times. 3, a global reckoning on the issue of equity, racial equity, gender equity, socioeconomic equity. 4, a looming mental health crisis that has been masked by the pandemic. And perhaps most urgently, a global climate crisis that gives us less than 10 years to avoid calamitous environmental catastrophe. It's a lot. But our first group of speakers will dive into all of these key forces and events shaping the global zeitgeist. And soon, we will hear from our opening speaker, Dame Vivienne Westwood. But first, I want to turn back a few weeks to Glasgow, Scotland. World leaders gathered at COP26, and we heard rousing speeches, but they actually failed to arrive at a deal to keep the now famous 1.5 alive. And what has stayed with me the most afterwards is a talk by Mia Mottley, the Prime Minister of Barbados. Have a look at this.
Your Royal Highness, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the pandemic has taught us that national solutions to global problems do not work. We come to Glasgow with global ambition to save our people and to save our planet, but we now find 3 gaps. On mitigation, climate pledges or NDCs. Without more, we will leave the world on a pathway to 2.7 degrees, and with more, we are still likely to get to 2 degrees. These commitments, made by some, are based on technologies yet to be developed, and this is at best reckless and at worst dangerous. So I ask to you, what must we say to our people living on the front line in the Caribbean, in Africa, in Latin America, in the Pacific, when both ambition and regrettably some of the needed faces at Glasgow are not present? What excuse should we give for the failure? In the words of that Caribbean icon, Eddie Grant, will they mourn us on the front line? When will we, as world leaders across the world, address the pressing issues that are truly causing our people angst and worry, whether it is climate or whether it is vaccines? Simply put, when will leaders lead? Our people are watching, and our people are taking note. And are we really going to leave Scotland without the resolve and the ambition that is sorely needed to save lives and to save our planet? Today, we need the correct mix of voices, ambition, and action. Do some leaders in this world believe that they can survive and thrive on their own? Have they not learned from the pandemic? Can there be peace and prosperity if 1/3 of the world literally prospers and the other 2/3 of the world live under siege and face calamitous threats to our well-being? Our world, my friends, stands at a fork in the road, one no less significant than when the United Nations was formed in 1945. But then, the majority of our countries here did not exist. We exist now. The difference is we want to exist 100 years from now. And if our existence is to mean anything, then we must act in the interests of all of our people who are dependent on us. And if we don't, we will allow the path of greed and selfishness to sow the seeds of our common destruction. 1.5 is what we need to survive. 2 degrees, yes, SG, is a death sentence for the people of Antigua and Barbuda, for the people of the Maldives, for the people of Dominica and Fiji, for the people of Kenya and Mozambique, and yes, for the people of Samoa and Barbados. We do not want that dreaded death sentence. And we've come here today to say, try harder, because our people, the climate army, the world, the planet, needs our actions now.
So, as Mia Motley says, just as we cannot end the COVID-19 pandemic as independent nations, vaccinating developing countries and leaving, vaccinating developed countries and leaving developing countries unvaccinated, we can't solve the climate crisis either without cooperating beyond individual nations and companies. The current moment is actually a major test of the current world order. And this opportunity, this moment, provides us with the opportunity to change. How can we create a more sustainable, equitable, and human future? What kind of society do we actually want to live in? So this year in the wider world, I want to focus on unity and global solutions and human connection, examining the roles that we as individuals, as organizations, as an industry have to play, and how we can develop the actions and tools to face what will undoubtedly be a challenging decade ahead. Dame Vivienne Westwood is a genuine icon of British fashion, and she has brought her punk spirit and subversive slogans to causes like civil rights, fighting climate change and overconsumption way back since she arrived on the scene in the 1970s. A pioneer of modern British style, Dame Vivienne's designs and her core messages are more relevant than ever, even amid such rapid social, cultural, and economic change. And last night, here on the Voices stage, as some of our community were still isolating following their arrival in the UK, Dame Vivienne shared her personal reflections on the state of the world. And in her own inimitable and creative way, Dame Vivienne personally designed a set of playing cards to visually demonstrate how she thinks we can address this crisis. So we are pleased to share her talk with all of you here and watching online again today.
Around 4000 BC, civilization began with conquest, kings, armies, warlords. Nothing has changed. War is fought for land and slaves. Empire is global. We have arrived at the same artificial arrangement that Orwell predicted in 1984. Russia, China, the US, and its allies are now a unity of 3 land areas covering the map in perpetual war. The whole world is in competition with itself to outsell itself, creating better and smarter weapons. We are defending ourselves from our own aggression. Temperature rising. As we see in COP, without cooperation, nothing can be done. War is competition. We have a war economy. The problem is capitalism. People here who have solutions, there is no solution unless you get rid of capitalism. I have the solution. Right, we are stuck. We are all in this together, jobs for death, and all subsidized by the taxpayer. Everything is connected. 45,000 people die from starvation every 24 hours. War is our major polluter and our major waste. End arms sales. It will halt climate change. If we could wave a magic wand, we'd be safe tomorrow. It will give us time. We don't have time. Governments will crash the whole world rather than submit to popular demand for peace. Tomorrow is too late. SOS.
We were so grateful to have Dame Vivienne here and that we were able to share her powerful call to action with you. We're going to post her playing cards on social media so you can have a look at them and share them on your channels. The pandemic has also upped pressure on brands and corporations to take action on issues from climate change to social justice. More and more investors are asking for it, and customers are now demanding it. But what role do businesses need to play in our society? Perhaps the best person to ask how companies can serve not only their shareholders, but also a wider group of stakeholders at a time when business leaders are rethinking their role in the world is Dame Vivienne Hunt. Vivienne was already a partner when I started working at McKinsey almost 20 years ago, and she has since risen to become one of the most important voices in British business. Here's her talk, which was also recorded live last night in front of the Voices community here in Oxfordshire.
Thank you very much, Imran, and it's a real pleasure to be with you today. I am passionate about the role of business in society, and I believe that the fashion industry has a positive role to play. It's really a delight to be here. On the other hand, it is a little bit intimidating to be speaking after the first Dame Vivienne Westwood. She is a legend and a tough act to follow. Anyone who can speak truth to power, mock up a cover of Tatler as Margaret Thatcher, and dress both punk stars, royalty, and every man, woman, or transgender on the street shows brilliant, impressive range. Virgil Abloh showed similar range. He was a pioneer, a visionary, elevating street style, celebrating creative excellence and Black excellence at the highest level of your industry. Time and time again, both icons have combined style and substance to be both of their time and well ahead of it. But what about today, our time? The wider world is being influenced by three mega trends: technology, inequality, and sustainability. All are relevant to the fashion industry. What COVID has done is accelerate these trends. In terms of technology, for example, fashion has seen a massive shift from digital both in the rise of e-commerce as well as digital-first startups, CFTs, NFTs. As for inequality, in many countries, it's just getting worse. And the pandemic has laid that bare, particularly hitting lower paid and frontline households. Our challenge and the biggest opportunity is sustainability. To be honest, the fashion industry has a long way to go to demonstrate its commitment to net zero. Let me give you a few numbers to prove the point. 12% of fibers are discarded on the factory floor. Overproduction is rife, so that 40% of garments end up being sold at markdown. Less than 1% of products are recycled into new garments. The fashion industry accounts for about 4% of greenhouse gases. Not so much, you say, but it's rising at 3% a year. On your current trajectory, fashion will miss 1.5-degree pathway by a huge margin. It's not a great record. I don't underestimate the difficulties. Even running a successful business in fashion is hard. During the pandemic, we started with only 45% of public companies in your sector creating value. After the pandemic, just this year, that number fell to 27%. Meanwhile, you already know supply chains are still in flux, raw material prices are increasing, and demand has bounced back, but it's done so unevenly. And in this context, sustainability may seem like something you can't quite afford. To a certain extent, this is true. Niche brands, niche companies struggling to make a profit, many of them may not have the capital to make major changes, never mind mid-sized businesses. And then there's the very simple fact that the business model of the entire industry is based on creative innovation and growth. Simply put, you want more people investing in fashion, probably from your own brand. That may increase demand, use of materials, and maybe even admissions. So, given all of this, you could be forgiven for thinking, this is incredibly difficult. Where do we even start? Of course, you can't really say out loud that you don't care about sustainability. That would be a quick way to get disinvited from Fashion Week, lose your seat in the front row, or be shunned at the cocktail bar. But it's a fair question, a tough question. So let me give you 3 answers. First, your customers want it. According to a recent McKinsey survey, more than 3 in 5 consumers say environmental impact is a consideration in their purchases. It's easy to say, and to be honest, it's less clear if people really put that principle into action when they purchase. But I think the attitude is genuine and the evidence is growing. Second, being good at sustainability can be good for business. For example, by making production more efficient or reducing waste. Or you could commit to the 15% pledge, increasing representation of Black or ethnically owned businesses in your supply chain. I don't want to oversell the idea. It's hard. The fact is that there will be real costs and investment to have a more sustainable path to net zero. And to pretend otherwise is just not helpful. Third, you don't actually have a choice. Like it or not, climate change and sustainability is a big part of our agenda, and it's here to stay. People expect business and fashion to do more than just make money, important though that may be. And given the greater depth of information available to consumers, the increasing pressure on regulation, and need for more social engagement from the industry, ignoring it is just not an option. I don't think business, and fashion no different than the rest, should be expected to do things that hurt your competitiveness, just in the name of sustainability. But I do believe that there's ways for fashion companies, large and small, to better deliver sustainability, move towards net zero emissions, and deliver inclusive growth. Partnerships are one idea. For example, a large Indian apparel exporter is working with its clients to share sustainability innovations. In another example, a major department store gets about half its fashion sales from small brands. The store realized that the small brands are in no position to achieve sustainability goals on their own, and so it committed to work with them to reach these goals by 2025. I know it's going to sound like consultant cliche, but that is win-win. It might even be win-win-win. The small brands maintain access, the store maintains exciting brands and relevance, and consumers have more sustainable choices. Another promising approach is to apply sustainability technologies right across your value chain. A significant percentage of clothes that are made don't actually get sold. That wastes materials, time, money, creativity. And proven technologies already exist to support the innovation that's needed in materials manufacture, demand forecasting, production plan, stock management, the nuts and bolts of the fashion industry. It improves operation and reduces waste. Use of standardized sizing, data-driven analysis, segments of one, all help you understand purchasing behavior better and could cut returns in e-commerce by over 50%. That, of course, improves profitability, but it also reduces emissions. The hard part, the really, really hard part, is getting started. Because in addition to climate change, you've got water and land use, air pollution, working conditions, all a part of your sustainability equation. There are so many stakeholders who have expectations for what the fashion industry should or should not do, and you are not going to be able to please them all. It's complicated, but you can do it. So start. Start by understanding your priorities and your stakeholders. It will help you narrow down what to do first and simplify some of that complexity. It'll give you a more clear path that's linked to your brand of how to get towards net zero and inclusive growth. Perfection is not possible. It's an elusive goal, but progress is an achievable one. Over the past 2 years, you've proven that case. Fashion has had to adapt fast, fast, fast. In terms of digitization, we estimate that the industry has made 5 years progress in just 1 year of the pandemic. It's time to apply that same pace, commitment, and creativity to sustainability. It would be a big change, but it can be done. You are unique. Fashion is unique. You combine creativity and intellect, inspiration and craft, discipline and flair. In short, you have all of the qualities that are essential to making a sustainable future possible. I want to close with a personal story. When I first met Imran and was an even younger woman, I used to blend my own makeup because there just wasn't many options for Black women. At first slowly, and then more quickly, the market changed. And now I have many high-quality choices. This was good for me personally, but more important, it represents a massive new consumer segment and created a distinctive opportunity for creative talent and, of course, Black talent. Another win, win, win. Sustainability can be a similar opportunity for the fashion industry. Another example of style meeting substance. Thank you.
Our next talk approaches the theme of stakeholders from another perspective. Artisanal communities were some of the hardest hit by the pandemic. Heritage crafts were already treading water pre-COVID, but the crisis has only exacerbated their challenges. Credit and equitable compensation have never been more important for these artisans, and yet the fashion world continues to plunder from them. Our next speakers have taken actions to support Indigenous communities around the world. Sano Tsuha is a teacher, farmer, and Indigenous women's rights activist who belongs to the Chakhesang tribe of Nagaland, India. And she's traveled more than 40 hours to be with us here today. But first, Rebecca Hui has dedicated her career to preserving heritage crafts by providing authorship, voice, and revenue to artisanal communities. Please welcome Rebecca Hui to share some background on how to think about cultural preservation.
Thank you so much. 10 years ago, I was coming from an urban planning background, fresh out of school, and I was really interested in understanding these rural and urban disparities I was reading so much about. So I ended up in India. And in India, one of the first things that people from the US might notice is poverty. So I did what every naive American would do, build a school. Especially because in rural areas, I had this thinking around, they can't get to school, so why don't we just bring the school to them? So let's make a school on wheels. So we constructed this 50-seater Mahindra bus. It was tactically put together as an owl because they were significant to the region, and it looks sort of like a version of Share. And we hired teachers to teach out of the school, and it serviced 4 after-school programs in the northern villages of West Bengal. But in about a few weeks, the teachers came to me from the city and said, these kids are too shy. They simply can't pick up English and math as quickly as the kids in the city. As I spent more time in the community, I didn't see these kids as being shy. When they danced, when they played music, when they conducted their crafts, they were bold. This girl was told that she couldn't pass to the 2nd standard, but when she stepped with her Santali traditional dance, I wanted a Juilliard recruiter to be there because she would shine. What I learned as I spent more time in indigenous communities is that they're not poor people. They have so much traditional knowledge and creativity, but with this whole narrative that's constantly told to them, that progress means the future that we see here with urbanization and technology, their voice and potential is obscured. With unstable farming income as subsistence farmers, they're not able to continue living off the land as easily. They're looking for income, and they end up leaving their communities to become someone else. But materiality is so different. When you make everything you own, you only make what you need. It takes the colors that you see from their clothing is often a reflection of the wood bark or the tea that was harvested on the land. And instead of just buying gold as a form of inheritance, these objects then are passed down from mother to daughter and the generations after. But over the next few years, as I spend more time in indigenous communities, there was really this loss of confidence. This man, he's a tractor driver. His name is Kuldeep Kusharam from Chhattisgarh in Madhya Pradesh. He calls himself a tractor driver and a farmer for a living. But one day he brought me into his house, gave me a cup of chai, and then showed me his paintings. But he hid it from himself. So I ended up thinking about all these incredible cultures and the knowledge that they hold in their hearts that has been obscured by this idea that they should leave, become someone else, learn English and math. And I realized it's not about closing the disparity between rural and urban areas by giving them this form of education to become someone else, but it's formalizing the traditional knowledge and the skills and assets that already exist there. So that's started my journey on starting Roots Studio. A few years later, I went down to Paris to understand how does the cultural world work? How is that set? And this woman was talking about the trends that were coming through. She said these terms, cottagecore, pastoralism, bucolic is going to be really in vogue. And she's like flicking through these slides, and a lot of these images were, there's a lot of Ayurveda going on and things like that. And everyone's just taking notes around that. And it's kind of humorous, right? But I think the underlying sentiment is valid, which is that in our world of hyperconsumption and growth, we're still looking to slow down and also heal. But when it's taken out of context and it loses its connection, and we see these images and these concepts, and it's repackaged and then manufactured into the millions, it's sort of an empty version of itself. And not only that, because a lot of these concepts are borrowed as Eastern mysticism, when communities and people who have been practicing this for centuries see their concepts butchered, it leads to this concept of appropriation. But we're in a space with a lot of accusation and little room for redemption. Everyone doesn't want to end up on Diet Prada. They don't want to get canceled. So we don't try at all, right? But that leads to a world of more homogeneity, and the world will ultimately become just dominated by one aesthetic. It became clear to me that we could actually connect these two worlds together. Why not let the people who've been living in cottages, who are pastoralists, design cottagecore and pastoralism, and actually share their traditional knowledge as well? So Root Studio was started under this idea of bridging global communities, indigenous communities to the global fashion market through 3 pillars: respect, reciprocity, and remuneration. The key elements of respect are around recognition. So for instance, this woman, Birabai, she comes from a matrilineal tribe in Madhya Pradesh, and when her home burned down in Jabwa, Madhya Pradesh, she moved to the city looking for work, but everyone didn't want to hire her because of the tattoos on her face. She finally found a job cutting grass at the front lawn of a museum, and at this museum, she saw people painting. She took the same traditions as a tattoo artist and then started readapting it using paintbrush and acrylic. When we bridged her story with a partner, we made sure that her story was completely told, that her name is on the collection. So they're not just a laborer hidden in the back with the designer title that's from the West. Reciprocity. When you're bridging cultures together, it's really important that both sides of the equation understand what we're saying and made aware. The Warli community in Maharashtra have these incredible motifs and designs that narrate folklore and also other significant parts of their way of life. They said explicitly, we're looking for ways to expand our income, but we don't want any of our sacred motifs to be appearing near the groin area or also on the feet. But there are contexts in which it can show up. So there's ways in which fashion can creatively collaborate as long as there's consent and both sides are well aware of the equation. Lastly, remuneration. If the idea of leaving the village was choosing between earning an income or realizing that people will pay for your traditional knowledge because organic, Zen, and sustainability is now a multi-billion-dollar market, I was damn sure that we could get them paid. This design was licensed through a process in which the artists had pre-approved the designs, and then this hoodie in particular did so well, and it was their highest selling product, but more importantly, because of that success, it was a win-win solution for the community. The community also saw the largest injection of capital spread across not just one artist, but the entire community, because these motifs are all shared together. Now, a lot of the times when people ask me, why am I so passionate about bridging cultures? A lot of times, people wonder, I realize that a lot of times people don't understand that the perception of these communities is extraordinarily one-dimensional. When I went to Chizami village in Nagaland, I realized that even though I might have this intention of wanting to collaborate or bridge, I met a woman who taught me so much about how I should exist in the world, how I should care for the land, and how I should continue on with more respect, compassion, and dignity. And that's the honor that I've had in doing this work all for the last 10 years. And I'm so excited that we are able to bring her all the way here from Chizami village, which is on the border of India, China, and Myanmar. All right. Well, we're so happy to, I'm so happy to see you here after being self-isolated yesterday. How did you get here? Tell us about your journey.
Yeah, thank you, Rebecca. I started my journey from my village on 29th November in the morning to the state capital where I have to do my COVID test to meet the COVID protocols of UK. And on 30th, I boarded a plane from the only airport of my state to Kolkata, and from Kolkata to Mumbai, and from Mumbai I boarded British Airways, which took me 10.5 hours to land what people call it, the grey city, London. Yeah, yeah, I'm happy to be moving out, and then this morning to be with you all.
Yeah, I think she's been on the road for 4 days. I don't know if anyone has spent more time commuting here. No? Okay. Can you tell us a little bit more about your community and also Nagaland?
I am from a small community, a Chagasan tribe, which is in the state of Nagaland. Nagaland is a small hilly state in the northeastern region of India, which is also a geostrategic location of the country because we share international boundaries with China, the Tibet, and Bhutan, Nepal, Bangladesh, and Myanmar. And this has also made it one of the most militarized region in Asia, or I should say in the world. And it has also many history of conflict, armed conflict. And I would like to focus on, more on the community. Nagaland is, population is only around 2 million, where we have 16 major tribes and other sub-tribes. Agriculture, the farming, subsistence agriculture is the main occupation, and besides that we do peripheral livelihood, which is the craft, the traditional craft, the bamboo craft, the pottery, the beadwork. And it is a rich culture, I should say. The Northeast region itself has more than 200 ethnic groups in the region, and also one of the biodiversity hotspots of the world. And so when it comes to livelihood, it is a diverse livelihood, and the kind of culture, kind of handcrafted work is usually inspired from the environment, from the rich biodiversity around, and each tribe is, that is can be identified by the kind of ornaments that we wear, by the kind of textile designs that we wear, and it has also a rich oral, music, tradition, and all the culture around the festivals around these are evolved from, agricultural calendar. So I think I'll end up there.
Yeah, you have some beautiful looms with you. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
My family says that, oh, you are wearing a very pale cloth for the occasion. I said, yes, I'm wearing because this is a very treasured one. It's my granny's, maybe the wraparound that I'm wearing is more than 100 years old, because my granny was saying that when the Second World War, Japanese came through our village to the great, battle in Kohima in 1944, and that's the time when she ran to the forest in hiding with her cotton. And so this is something that I treasure very much, and this is something that I have inherited from her.
And I'm also wearing this because this is something that my community during the pandemic relook at the resources, local resources available, and this is the time when the cotton that they grow in their farmland, they have hand spun and then they have woven during this pandemic. So I felt that this is a very important piece that I should take and share that, like when this kind of pandemic hit us, the only answer is that look within your own ecosystem what is available, within your own reach. So this is it. I'm wearing not really an original stuff. And the thing is that like our village was burnt a couple of times during war. And that is the time when, like most of the traditional, ornaments, the original ornaments that were burnt along with the houses. So, I'm wearing something, but, I feel happy wearing this.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just like, you even haven't even gone to the shawl, but when it's so different in terms of designs, having such sacred origins to them, and it's so different than in our world where designs can just, change every single quarter, right? Can you tell us what it means for your designs to feel a sense of what does respect, reciprocity, and remuneration mean when you're looking to collaborate?
When it comes to, the textiles that we use, it's not just a piece of cloth, but it has social meanings to it, it has cultural importance to it. And so when we talk about respect, especially in fashion, I think it's very important to understand the local context, the historical context, and also the social meanings, the culture meanings, spirituality meanings attached to the piece of cloth. And I think, if you understand that and if you acknowledge that, that's where respect comes in for me. Yeah.
Yeah, and in terms of reciprocity, what's the willingness and openness to share?
We live in a world of coexistence. And we are, as indigenous peoples, we are, based on, like sharing. The solidarity economy is very important part of our lifestyle or of our culture. But when, like this trust is misused, that's where, the boundaries comes in, that's where restriction comes in, that's where, rigidity comes in. And I think it's very important that we acknowledge each other, we respect the otherness, and not only what you think is good, but what is good to others also, and that's very important aspect.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting to work between collectivist versus individualist societies and how we decide what do we protect as our own versus how do we share. Can you share also a little bit about what livelihoods and remuneration means to the weavers and the producers in your community?
I work with a women's organization called Northeast Network. Northeast Network started a livelihood program way back in 2008, especially when it comes to textile. We started to revive, or keep the tradition of weaving textiles alive, and also create an opportunity to bring in sustainable livelihoods to the women, to the stakeholders who are mostly like marginalized, having a very small plot of land to cultivate. So it is this time that we feel that, it's important that side by side, when we talk about the social enhancement programs, it is also important to enhance livelihood opportunities, and that's when we started, working with the weavers, and we feel that, they deserve to be, remunerated, that the kind of time that goes into, weaving a piece of cloth, because it's all handcrafted, and that has to be understood. And I think it's very important that we acknowledge that bit when you try to collaborate.
Yeah, and I think it's so interesting to think about the role of money when it's production for life, to sustain yourself and to be able to afford an education or buy seeds for the planting versus money in the context of just profit maximization.
Yes.
Can you share also a little bit about how COVID-19 affected your community?
When COVID-19, the lockdown was announced, and it was sudden, we heard about, the pandemic, that's like the COVID that is now spreading, that was last year. And, it was taken, for the first time in our generation that we felt that the world has come to a halt, regardless of rich, regardless of, less developed or developing countries. And that was time where our community, I am from the rural area of Nagaland, so the impact was not as much as my friends who are in urban areas, because their livelihood depends on, the small things that they do. There are workers in some shops, in some, private sectors, and particularly the women whom we work, the street vendors in the urban settings of, the state. They were the ones who were the most impacted, because they could not really earn a livelihood because complete, lockdown was imposed. And I think that was also the time when we could see that our communities came together in solidarity to people who are disadvantaged during this lockdown. So there is this whole thing of community mobilization, women coming together, going into the forest to forage the green herbal, edibles, the green, the forest food, and gathering those and sending off to urban areas. It's also like during this time when, a lot of our young people came back to the village. They were out in the city working in some small private sectors and all. They came back. The community, organized a quarantine center, where we don't call it a quarantine center, but a creativity hub where, the bamboo craft, the weaving stuff, the knitting stuff were made available, and the young people who have come back from the cities were, occupied with those creative, little joyful things during quarantine, and it did help a lot. And it is also something that, a lot of, other communities also appreciated what our community did, because it was trauma to come back, Suddenly, they have to rush, they have to catch trains, they have to look for vehicles. And when they landed in the village, that was the space given in a nearby forest, where is open space, where, some of these creative little joyful things were made available to them. At thus, even that's changing the whole, face of what pandemic is really, because we were all scared and everybody was so stressed about, the developments on this disease.
Yeah, and I think the other crisis, climate change, we all are talking about in these high-level policy rooms, but as people who live off the land, when a monsoon season is late or the rains don't come, it completely affects your life, right? You can't just go to the grocery store to buy more things. How has climate change affected you and your community?
Climate change is a reality for all of us. We live in one planet. And when I talk about my community, our community, live on subsistence agriculture, and we are dependent on favorable climate. And that's the time when, our people suffer when there is, this erratic rainfall, where there is, rising temperature and drying up of our water sources, and, pest disease, this crop disease. So it's like, we are like any other indigenous communities who are dependent on land are affected, impacted badly. And the kind of, strategy, or I should say, resilient, or I should say, the living culture that we try to promote is, agrobiodiversity. You promote diverse food. You grow diverse food so that you are not, affected that way that you have to starve. So I think, it's also to do with any other production patterns that you can't live on one thing. You need diverse livelihood. You need diverse ecosystems. And I think that's...
I mean, you've done such an incredible lifetime of work in gender advocacy, advocating for stewardship of the land. What brought you on this path, and what message do you have for all of us today?
I believe on the principles, the values of respect, compassion, dignity, fairness for myself and for others. And that's the reason why I have taken this path. To be part of the healing process, I think we all need to be part of the healing process. To be part of, like this changing scenario, especially in times of climate change, in times of pandemic, it is important for us to pause a while to listen to our own heartbeats and also to listen to the heartbeat of the land that you are standing, to breathe the air, to breathe the water, to feel the heartbeat of our planet is important. And I think this is the moment that we have all come here for that reason.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rebecca and Seno, for being here with us. I mean, when I heard Seno's travel journey from all of those different places, I think she gets the award for the most difficult and challenging journey to get here, but it was so worthwhile, and we're so grateful that you came all the way from Nagaland. So thank you both very, very much.
Thank you.
For many companies, taking action to address issues in the world, like the ones we've been discussing this morning, have involved aligning themselves with an activist. But what does activism really mean amid this slew of campaigns and slogans that we see play out on social media? And what role can it play in the human experience? One of the most compelling voices in activism today is Janaya Future Khan. I first started following their Sunday sermons and learned that they are a leading voice in the global crusade demanding social justice, transformation, and equality for all. Please join me in welcoming Janaya Future Khan to the Voices stage.
This is going to be really important. Do you all see me? Do you see how good these glasses look on me? Do you know how hard it is to find really good sunglasses? Okay. For the condensed awesome types. So, I'm going to tell you a story, and I'm actually going to tell you a couple of them. And then we're going to bring them all together. Cool? So, I'm on a flight. I'm late, and I'm very territorial about carry-on space. And when you're late, it's a gamble. So I get there, and I'm getting really spoiled. I'm flying first class this time, and I'm an anti-capitalist, but I'm the anti-capitalist where everyone should be flying first class. That's how they get you. You switch up real fast. So, the space in the overhead is full. I look over across from me. It's empty. The guy who's sitting there, he's got no baggage on his lap or something like that. So I take my luggage, my carry-on, European size, really neat. I go to swing it up there. And in a way that absolutely belied his age, he stood up, this man, and he put his hand in front of my face. And he said, "Do you belong here?" Yes, he was. Yes, he was. Now, my first thought was, I can take this guy. He's a little small. And there was something that happened in that exchange, because of course this isn't the first time something like this has happened. In fact, if you are a person who travels everywhere, no matter how far you go, somebody always believes you exist on the margin, no matter how much you speak to the heart of things. Now this particular man, I looked at him, in all my years, because there is no handbook that tells you exactly what to say in this situation, right? What part of the decades of research or the hundreds of years that have passed, what part should I start at to educate this man right? That's my call to action, right? I'm supposed to educate everyone that I come across. But time has taught me that silence can do a lot too in those moments. So I looked at him, and he looked at me, and in that moment, something happened, and his eyes softened. In that moment, some kind of exchange took place, and then immediately he started to backtrack, and he said, no, you don't understand, I just thought. And I let him talk, and I stepped around him and put my luggage up there, but I've thought about that moment ever since. And I wonder if he has too. You see, something happened in that. Not a single one of us got to choose what body we'd be born into, what zip code we lived in, how our hair would grow out of our head, what skin color. Some of us got really lucky in that lottery. Some of us are too cute for two genders. But not a single one of us got to choose that. We're born into a script. Now, everyone is very protective of their story, and everyone has a story, and that's the reason why people lose it when you talk about privilege, because they think that you're attacking their story. And we cling to that, don't we? So we hear privilege, we think, oh, that's my story of self. And anyone would get offended with that, but here's the thing, privilege isn't about what you've gone through, it's about what you haven't had to go through. And so we're not talking about stories, and we're talking about scripts. And every single person in this room and everyone out there, we were born into a script. And some of those scripts have contradictions. We have solid nuclear families, but maybe it wasn't such a great upbringing despite what was in bank accounts. Or maybe you transitioned and you lost that. We're all born into a script. Some of us defy that. And that's precisely why so many black people and trans people and marginalized folks, Muslims, everybody, why we're so attacked. Because if we were to accept the script that we were born to, especially in this country, it would be to accept our own destruction. But you all know about defiance. That's what this industry is all about, right? Rewriting things, changing things. So let's talk about that script for a second. This man, if I had asked him why he stood up, why he felt compelled in that moment to stop me, I doubt he'd be able to answer it. It was so built in that his understanding of belonging wasn't based on who he was, but who he was not. And I've thought about that because, you see, if we're talking about what the work of activism really is, it's about seeing the world as it is, not as we were told. I'll get back into that in a moment. See, in that moment, what he didn't understand was he had forfeited a part of who he was. And that's what happens when we completely embody the script. We forfeit a part of who we are to fit into an entity and a system not a single one of us had a hand in creating. But it's funny how quickly those conditions become our own when we get comfortable. And I'm here to remind you that complacency is the death of the soul. You see, in that moment, he was so wedded to this idea of me and forfeiting a part of his agency that he became a defender. He became a guard, guarding this idea of me while I live my life. He's not growing as a person. I'll tell you another story, and then we'll get into the good stuff. I do a lot of this talking thing. Yes, I'm very good at it. But I'm not always welcomed where I go. And I remember this one gig. I get up there, and on my way, there's lynch ropes hanging on trees. I was talking at Duke University. And the threats were considered so real that I needed security, but it was going to be awkward if it was off-duty cops. For them, I'm very friendly. So some emergency calls were made, and a friend of mine ended up, hooking me up with the Nation of Islam, which is a very traditionally homophobic entity, as much as they are for black liberation, or a kind of black liberation, I should say. And my gender identity was very much Battlestar Galactica at that time. It was very intense. And before I knew it, before the Black Panther sort of changed the world and everyone was talking about Wakanda, I was surrounded by 8 beautiful men in bow ties and black suits, and everybody just thought that I was some kind of African royalty, and I was like, absolutely, yes, I am. And we went through this entire day, and then one of them started to flirt with me, the biggest one, and he was like, don't worry, sister, I'd take the bullet for you. And I was like, is that what straight flirting is right now? And then, I mean, he never left my side, and he came out with a rose, and I thought, are they teaching magicians in the nation? But at the end of that, we had an exchange. You see, they didn't know what my pronoun was, or they didn't understand what my gender identity was. And they really only knew how to interact with me in a particular way. But we got through that night because we had an agreement, a 25% agreement. They believed that my life was worth protecting, and I believed that their life was worth protecting, and for that night, that was enough. I think we've got to stop getting this idea in our head that we have to trust each other 100%. So what is the work of activism? Activism is, at the heart of it, being for someone else who you needed most in your most vulnerable moments. And here's the thing about activism. It doesn't build character, it reveals character. And isn't it about time you figured out exactly who you were? Isn't that why we're here? Isn't that why trans people are so threatening? So we have the audacity to be clear about what it is that we are, despite being born into a rigid, dated, and boring script. No one's ever offended by pronouns. They're offended by the implications, the audacity. Here's the thing. There's an endless array of buzzwords now, and we're all really good at performing it. We use the hashtags, and we wear the t-shirts. We can put free on a turtleneck. We can do all kinds of things. We're really, really good at that. Something about a black square once. And it can be very difficult in this time of infinite content and finite attention to know exactly where you should be paying attention. What should I care about? What's the most urgent thing? And we think it can only be one. So, zoom out 30,000 feet. What is active in you? The work of activism is at the heart of it being fully alive. Let's go back to that man on the plane. If it is truly the ability to think for oneself, right? Because I like to think of the muscle, the mind rather, as the muscle of the soul. And if not thinking and not being present is the death of it, which is complacency, then the ability to think for oneself and to see the world as it is, not as we were told, and to see each other as we are, not as we were told we are, well, that's one of the holiest things that one can do, and the opposite, the most heinous. So the work of activism is at the heart of it being fully alive, and when you become fully alive, charged, present, there is no issue that is too great. Your call to action, it's not yet too late to be the person you always thought that you could be. And you thought that you could be someone remarkable, and you're right. You don't have to be remarkable to do this work, and I used to think that you did. Oh, I used to think that you did. And then I learned something in all my years. Nobody starts out as remarkable. We become remarkable when we fight for freedom, when we fight for justice, when we fight for liberation. You too become remarkable. Here's another call to action. Because everybody stands in the age where everybody stands for something. And we all stand for something now. We're all saying everything all the time. It's not just about what you stand for. It's about who you sit with. Because there are parts in us, of us, that can only be accessed by others. So your work is to live remarkable and extraordinary lives, and you do that by seeking out truth. We don't get overwhelmed by issues. We give them attention, we give them life. Find out who you are. live an extraordinary and remarkable life, and dare to imagine a world that is vastly different from the one that we live in. Because remember, someone imagined shackles on black wrists, and enough people believed it to make it true. Somebody imagined borders, and enough people believe it to make it true. Our job is to be the disruptors, the diviners of change. Our job is to imagine differently and make it true. Thank you.
There'll be lots more time for all of you to get to know the amazing mind of Janaya over the next couple of days. This final talk is really important. And the wider world is usually when we talk about economics and business and climate crisis and all this stuff. But I wanted to bring in a talk that's really important into this session because I think it is an important issue in the wider world. Most of us in this room have experienced loneliness, more so than ever amid the pandemic, which kept us separated from our loved ones and the essential interactions that fuel the human experience. Social distancing caused a complete breakdown in contact among family, friends, and entire communities. Vivek Murthy, the former Surgeon General of the United States, has called this the loneliness epidemic. Now, as we're starting to come together again, the questions many of us are asking are, what does a genuine human connection really look like? What does it feel like? Our next speaker has been obsessed with this topic for more than 2 decades. Her podcast, Horizontal with Lila, dispels shame, alchemizes human connection, and combats loneliness. To explain the intimacy equation, please welcome Lila.
When I was 15, I used to work at a Renaissance fair. Oh, you know it. So it's, for those of you who don't, it's when a bunch of Americans dress up in corsets, pretend to be British, and run around eating turkey legs the size of your head. And I loved it. I was absolutely obsessed with it. I was especially enamored with the guy playing the Archbishop of Canterbury, who was 30. Yes, you did the math right. Aside from my proclivity for much older men, I was a really good kid. My friend Kim, however, was a different sort of teenager, and she kissed him. Right. So I went into school the next day and slapped her across the face and got detention. But you know what? I kissed him later. So I just shared with you what I would call a minor secret. A minor secret is not a soliloquy about your childhood trauma. It's just a little glimpse into the you-ness of you. It's usually the second thing I lead in my connection workshops. So let's do it now. Turn to someone you don't know or don't know very well and share with them a minor secret. You have 30 seconds, so get to it. It's much more pleasurable if you participate. Come on. That's 15 seconds, so switch. If you can hear me say, If you can hear me say, So if you didn't get to conclude your minor secret, now you have some unfinished business. We are simultaneously the most connected and the loneliest we have ever been. COVID didn't start this. In 2015, researchers at Brigham Young University discovered that the morbidity of loneliness, the increased likelihood that you will die, is equivalent to that of smoking 15 cigarettes a day or air pollution. In 2018, the UK appointed a minister for loneliness, and then you know it's serious, right? That same year, a student opinion in the New York Times asked, should every country have a minister for loneliness? Yes. Yes, we should. I'm available. Ooh. Spicy. I'm so nervous. That's my intimacy. In 2020, the year of our plague, 61% of people reported being sometimes or always lonely, according to a survey conducted by the health insurance company Cigna. And the loneliest of us all, it's not our parents, it's not our grandparents, it's not our peers, it's your children and your grandchildren. Because somehow, even with all of our unprecedented technology, no one has yet solved what I'll call the other gamer's dilemma. That when you shut your computer screen, power down your phone, take off the VR headset, there you are, alone in your room. Oh, goodness gracious, great balls of fire. There you are, alone in your room. When I was 10 years old, my mother gave me a book called Games People Play, which is about transactional analysis, the analysis of what happens between people, and introduced me to the concept of strokes. A stroke is the basic unit of social interaction. So, how's it going? It's going is a pair of strokes or a transaction. He called it a stroke because we know that babies need to be held in order to thrive. So do adults. It's not like that ever goes away. My friend Jeremy's mom says we need 8 hugs a day just to feel normal. Not even to feel fabulous, just to feel normal. By that measure, do any of you feel normal this week? Ah, you are a special case. Most of us don't. I don't. Open to changing that later, though. But we need it in order to thrive. I wanted to answer the question, what is intimacy made of? If intimacy is the cure for loneliness, then what's the recipe? So I came up with an intimacy equation. People love equations. The first component required for intimacy is disclosure. I share something of my special self with you. You share something of your special self with me. This can be verbal or nonverbal. Earlier, I shared a minor secret with you. Is that intimacy? Are we intimate yet? No, not yet. Because intimacy isn't a one-person show. But if I've taken a little risk and I've shared with you something that matters to me, we've begun. The second component required for intimacy is resonance. I understand something about you deeply. You understand something about me deeply. My late Brazilian aunt, my titia Helena, she would say, "Nós vibramos na mesma sintonia." We vibrate on the same note. So we've shared, we've understood something about one another, but it's not intimacy yet. Because this third component is crucial, permeability. I need to allow you to affect me in some way. You need to allow me to affect you in some way, to the point of being somehow changed by our interaction. We are moved to laughter, to tears, to change our minds. how incredibly intimate it is to change your mind about something based on your interaction with another human being. Disclosure plus resonance multiplied by permeability equals intimacy. Disclosure, resonance, permeability, DRP, or drip. Drip. If you've ever had a leaky faucet, you know you can fill a whole bathtub that way. And so I have 3 ideas for you this morning as to how you can cultivate intimacy with those you know and those you wish to know. For the D, disclosure. We all shared one possible method, a minor secret, but maybe you don't want to lead with that. So try a genuine compliment. I have a theory about compliments, which is that they don't belong to me. They belong to the person I think them about, and so I need to return them to their rightful owner. When I shared this with my friend Chris, he said, compliments tell you more about the person giving them than the person receiving them. When I share with you what I see in you as glorious, I reveal something about what's meaningful to me. Disclosure. For the R, resonance. Try the single greatest communication tool I have ever learned, reflective listening. It's a way to instantly deepen your strokes. When somebody shares with you something of consequence, their feelings, their struggles, their ambitions, you can repeat back to them what you heard them say in your own words, including your interpretation, and then check, is that it? Did I get it? You go back and forth until you've really gotten it. When I write, I ask myself, is this true? Could it be more true? When you've gotten to the most true together, then you can ask, is there more? Until there is no more. That's how someone can feel fully heard. Resonance. For the P, permeability, I'll borrow a term from the world of photography. Aperture. Aperture is the opening that lets light in. And it can be opened up or closed down based on the amount of available light and how much you want to be in focus. And we too have an aperture. It determines how much I let you in. And it's a muscle that can be stretched and contracted. Most of us know how to contract it very well. Too well. Listen, I'm a New Yorker. I understand the need for protection. But if you want to have a more intimate life, you must become a detective on the case of your own aperture. What opens you up? What allows you to be penetrable? You might start by uncrossing your arms or putting down your phone pacifier for a few minutes at a time, because intimacy begins and grows in small increments. Byrne called it a stroke. The Gottmans, a bid. Love 2.0 calls it micro moments of positivity resonance. I call it a drip. 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 The thing is, somebody's got to go first. Let that person be you. You may not be well witnessed. You may not be well received. But you might. And I stake myself on this. Connection is worth the risk. So, want to share a minor secret? I'll go first. Thank you.
So, over the next few days, I hope you will take time to form some new human connections here at Voices. Lila will be doing a no-holds-barred no-holds-barred conversation in the mill room this evening. You can ask her anything you want. That's what she told me last night. She said to me that when there's groups of people together, people get nervous and they don't want to ask questions. I said, you don't know the Voices community. So we'll see you later this evening in the mill room for some more from Lila. That brings us to the end of our first session, The Wider World, at Voices 2021. Today's programming will resume very shortly at 11 a.m. London time with the unveiling of our annual report on the state of fashion 2022. That will be followed by another session, both jam-packed with inspirational leaders and thinkers. Coming up next, we have a bumper lineup including Tommy Hilfiger, Dame Ellen MacArthur, India Moore, Halima Aden, Jillian Mercado, and many others. Thank you all for tuning in. We look forward to seeing you after a quick break.